Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our Late Again, How Schools Are Tackling Tardies panel discussion. My name is Jason Richards. I'm the founder here at Minga and very excited to welcome our guests here in a second and get started. This is a webinar style session today, so we'll go through a few canned questions. There are a handful of poll questions that we'll cover as we walk through the webinar. Um, and then we have some time for some Q&A at the back. A few housekeeping items. You'll notice there is a Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen in the webinar panel. So if you have questions that come up during the event, you can throw questions in there, but we will hold all questions until the end. So again, thank you everyone for joining. Depending on where you are across the country, you are either in the middle of your morning at school, so thank you for carving some time out and joining us, or if you're on the west, it's bright and early, so thanks for joining early. Um, with that being said, welcome again, and we'll get started. So, Emily, if you can pass on to the next. So first off, I would love to welcome our three panelists, and I am going to give them each a moment from left to right to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves, about their school, and where they're from. So without further ado, Holly, if you want to kick us off.
Good morning. I am Holly Lawson. I am the principal at Montgomery County High School in Mount Sterling, Kentucky. This is my fourth year as the principal and our third year using Minga. So like I said, I'm from Kentucky, so it's about 10 o'clock here and we are finally having a little bit of a warm day. I told them earlier it had snowed on Tuesday and it's going to be 70 degrees on Sunday. So it's a little bit of a wild time here.
Thank you, Holly. And welcome, Kimberly.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Felix. I'm the activities director at Rio Linda High School, which is in Sacramento County, California. This is my fourth year as the activities director and our second year using Minga.
Welcome, Kimberly. Thank you. And Chris.
Yes, so my name is Chris Bryant. I am the head principal at Midland Legacy, or Lee High School. We're changing our name back again to Lee. So this is my first year as the head principal, but I've been here for 25 years. If you've watched Friday Night Lights, we are the team that beat Permian in Friday Night Lights. So we have a little history here.
I love it. Some early morning Texas football trivia. Always good way to start. So, awesome. Moving on to the next slide, just to talk a little bit about why we are all here today. A quick agenda, what we'll cover. We're going to talk about some challenges. You know, a big part of this when we talk to administrators is often there's a sense of isolation. Like, why are we struggling with tardies so badly? And one of the things is like this is something we talk about with schools across the country in every state, in every socioeconomic demographic. You know, with every slice of school that we talk to, tardies are just a, you know, systemic issue that everyone's facing. So we're just going to cover a little bit of that with some our school leaders here today, and really it's a sense that, you know, you're not alone in this. We're going to do a little understanding about the systems that make accountability visible and fair when it comes to tardies and how to manage this equitably within your community. Some solutions that some of our school leaders here are using to make managing tardies more efficiently. And that is a really important distinction today, is that we are not here to fix tardies. And it is a really important conversation to have with your admin team, with your staff, and even with your parents. You're not going to fix tardies. You can have a dramatic impact and reduce them, and you can also greatly reduce the impact they're having at your school. But it's important to set the right expectations that, you know, ending tardiness and ending truism and attendance issues is not something that's just going to happen through a webinar. And it is something that, you know, again, is very systemic within our society as a whole. And then we're going to finish off that though and talk about the impact. So, Going to be lots of great conversations and lots of great Q&A. So I'd really encourage you all to please participate in the polls and the surveys. The data is really helpful for us. We'll ask a few open-ended questions for some comments, but also, we'll share some of the results as we go through the webinar, and it's going to give you some ideas on how everyone else, on the session is doing as well. So thanks, Emily. Quick fun fact stat. 9.5% of high school students across the United States are tardy every single day on average. And this is the recorded data. And we all know that a lot of tardies are going missed. So in all likelihood, this number is even worse than this. So we're talking 1.6 million high school students tardy every single day. It's a shockingly huge number, and if you split that across all of our school days during the year, that's 280 million tardies a year. So almost a tardy for everyone in the USA. It is and a greatly increasing number. So this is, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think there's any stat that could be more powerful than this on why implementing systems and being very intentional about how you manage tardies, consistent and intentional, is so important. Oh, Emily, we just lost the slide presentation. Okay, so before we get started and we jump in with everyone, we're just going to put a poll out to everyone on the webinar today, and we have lots of folks here this morning. So thank you again all for joining. And poll question number 1 is, how big of a challenge are tardies at your school right now? Great, lots of answers pouring in here. So really, interesting here. The two parts to this question, because we were joking about this one the other day when we created the poll question. But so number 1, a daily headache. So everyone here, there's a few 5-alarm fires there, but it sounds like the vast majority of everyone feels like this is a daily headache that's happening every single day. So still a pretty serious issue, and obviously you're on the webinar, so you want to join. And then I had a good cute question for this one, for our panelists. Does anyone know what a 5-alarm fire actually means? Where the terminology 5-alarm fire comes from, or what it represents? Anyone? Nobody? Okay, it's a good thing to Google, since we do use it in language, in common language sometimes, and then we are laughing about it on what it actually means. I'm not going to even answer it, but you should Google it if you want to know. And it is obviously a fire department trivia question. And fun fact, my background, I was a firefighter for a few years, so that's the only reason I know that. But awesome. So 87% a daily headache on our poll question today. So and that was kind of the number 2 ranking. Oops. Stop sharing. Oh, I don't know how to do that. Emily, can you move us to our next? So let's get started here right out of the gate, and then and maybe Kimberly, I'm gonna call on you to start us off with question number 1. But we'll go through everyone here. But at your school, could you tell us a little bit about how was tardiness affecting your school?
So prior to using Minga, we were using several different platforms to track all different kinds of things. We had one platform for PBIS, one for tracking tardies and consequences, and then our system that we use for school data management, ARIES, so our attendance, grades, all that. And there was no way for students to monitor and track and really know how many tardies they had, how many consequences they had. So we were missing that student accountability piece, and it just became a overwhelming, like everyone was saying, daily headache. We had kids who just didn't see the value in being class on time. They didn't see the consequences. They didn't understand what was happening. So moving over to Minga really allowed us to put everything into one place. And now students can see, oh, I have X number of tardies, I have X number of detentions, and they know where to look, which is really helping us to create more accountability across the board.
So if I summarize there a little bit of some of the challenges you were seeing at the beginning, it was a lack of clarity for everyone on what was actually happening within the systems that you were trying to even track and manage tardies with.
Yeah, and then it was creating burnout for teachers and staff because they felt like, why are we doing this work to send a kid to the office to get a tardy slip if there's no consequence attached to it?
Yeah, really great. Thank you for sharing. Chris, maybe over to you. Can you talk a little bit about, the impact that tardies were having on your school before you got started into managing them, the way you're doing today?
Yeah, definitely. So we're an open campus, which means that kids can go to lunch and go anywhere they want to. So in the mornings, the number of students that were showing up were in droves of lateness. And then after lunch is over with, guess what? They were showing up in droves of lateness on that one too. So we were having lots of issues on our side of things to be able to figure out, how do we manage that? How do we take care of that? Because the system that we were using at that time was a Google Sheet, which really wasn't the most efficient to be able to try to track them and be able to catch them for their tardies. Now we're able to really go through every single class period and really work on that side of it itself. So that's helped out a lot.
So when it sounded like, if I'm hearing you correctly, beginning of school and after lunch were where tardies were really hitting the hardest. And when you ended up with these queues of students waiting, like what was was it just taking a lot of time to get everyone through and then on their way to class? And then, what impact was that having with say teachers in the classroom having these students stream in late at the beginning of school and after lunch all the time?
Yeah, definitely. The teachers get frustrated because they started their lesson and here a kid comes in and they're having to re-explain their instructions on the lesson. And so that was the major problems that we were having in just getting kids into the classroom. And again, the other part of Minga that I love is the hall pass, because our halls were crowded and now we have no kids in the hallway. So
Love it. Thank you, Chris. Holly, over to you. Just that question again. How were tardies impacting your school, and where do you feel you saw the biggest negative impacts of these, this kind of chronic tardiness?
I would say consistency with teachers. I think it was very overwhelming for them to keep track of because it was on them to do that. Teachers had to keep track of how many tardies the kid had coming to their class, and it was per teacher. So a kid was maybe racking up tardies all across the building, but they didn't get notified. Like we didn't get notified as administrators until they had gotten 3 tardies for a teacher. So they may have had 2 tardies to first period or second period, but then had 2 other tardies to third period. But we weren't getting notified until they got 3 tardies to a specific teacher. And so that was really a lot of tardies. And then you just had teachers that were like, I don't remember how many tardies that they had, so I'm not really going to keep up with it. So that consistency across the building was really bad. So we had kind of some feedback from central office that we just had a lot of kids in the hallways and late to class that they were seeing when they were in the building. And then teachers complained about it on kind of some staff surveys at the end of the year that tardies were a major problem. I have kids coming late to class, and so that's disruptive. So when we were looking for hall pass solutions, obviously tardies was something that Minga did. And so when we started doing that, it took that off their plates because all they had to do was mark it in Minga, and then we are notified when they got 3 tardies. So obviously we had kids who got tardies the very first day because I'm tardy to second period, I'm tardy to fourth period, and oh, I was tardy to sixth period. So the kids got, they were getting caught a whole lot quicker, but the teachers really appreciated it because now it's off their plate and it just managed that for them, and all they had to do was mark it. So it was just a huge thing for them to be able to, there's just anything you can take off their plates, they appreciate.
I love that. Thank you, Holly. Something that's talked a lot about just in society around tardiness is that being chronically tardy, if you have one of those friends that's always tardy all the time, you set up time to meet with them and they're always late, is that can frequently send a message to us that if someone's tardy all the time, that our time's not valuable, that our time's not important. And I'm just curious, we talk about the instructional impact in school all the time and the operational impacts of tardiness, but did you ever hear any, comments from teachers around that sense of feeling like their time wasn't valuable, their time in a classroom was valuable? And just open question to anyone who might have heard some of those comments or if you heard anything related to things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think the teachers did feel that way, is that their time wasn't valuable, and they kind of just threw up their hands. I mean, at our school, and so I think what we've got now is something that we're able to give them the focus that they can still do instruction and not throw up their hands.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Those are great, and thank you so much. We're gonna Emily, you can maybe push us back to our next slide, but that's super helpful. And we're not running chat, so maybe I'll hold off on that. But um, as we get into this, and obviously, you all alluded to this a little bit on what was that aha moment, that straw on the camel's back, where you knew you needed to do something. But maybe Holly, if you want to kick us off this time, what was the aha moment at your school where like something needed to change for your staff and students?
So this is my 4th year as principal, and we kind of had a poor culture in the building, to be quite honest. We had really low teacher morale from a previous administration, and I was an assistant principal here, so like I kind of knew we needed some change in leadership when I took over, and there were just things that we needed to change. And so just from some teacher feedback, we did some teacher surveys, and tardiness kept coming up. Like they were just tired of kids being late, nothing being done. And I think our previous principal was just kind of like, well, I mean, they're getting to class, it doesn't really matter. And so I think we just knew something needed to change. And so when we were looking for solutions, I think like I said, it took anything we could take off teachers' plates, we tried to do that. So we took assigning detentions from teachers. Like those were things that it was just an inconsistent piece. And so Minga allowed us to do that. So we started with Tardies. And so that was a huge piece. And we kind of knew it was a big deal for them, because when we did our next teacher survey after we started using Minga, the biggest takeaway was we really appreciate Minga for Tardies. That was a huge thing, because I went back after we did our meeting last week just to look to see, and that was a huge thing that kept coming up. We just appreciate Minga for Tardies. We appreciate Minga for Tardies. But I think it was because I wasn't having to assign it. I didn't have to do it as a teacher. Somebody else is doing it for me. And I think in today's society of teachers, anything that you can do that they don't have to do, that administrators can take away from them, because I think sometimes we're the bad guys in the teacher world. I think that's something we can take away to make their jobs easier is always a good thing for them. And they really appreciated that piece of it.
Oh, Holly, I love that. And I think that it sounds like tardiness, was having a huge impact on culture, kind of related to that question we were just having before, and having a big impact on the overall morale of your teachers. And, something about having a system, a consistent system, is actually sending that message back to your community that says, your time, like this is important and we take this seriously. And we're doing something about it that's tangible and has accountability built in. And it sounds like that's had a really big impact on your culture. But I mean, we're going to talk about that, the positive impacts more. So maybe Chris, over to you on what was that aha moment?
Yeah, for me, again, I've been here for 25 years. So as a teacher, I saw the tardies, but I didn't see it. So 3 years ago, became an assistant principal, and I saw the amount of kids that were tardy, and our principal had just come in from a different district, and she said, we need to take care of this. We need to fix a solution. And I said, well, this is just the way it's always been. And so that's whenever I started doing some research, and we had an opportunity to go to Allen High School and see that they were using a system. And I'm like, you got 7,000 students. How are you able to do it? And what we actually saw was we saw being at that time, but that was kind of our aha. It was just be able to sit there as a system principal. I saw the number of students that were tardy every single day, and my goal was to fix it. I was going to do everything I could to fix it. And again, just like you said at the beginning, we're not really fixing it, but we are slowing the numbers down, and that's what we definitely have done on our campus.
Well, that's great, Chris. You don't have enough gray in your hair, your beard to be there for 25 years. So I don't know.
It's getting there. It's
To
getting
that
there.
Texas sun or something. I'm a little jealous though. Thank you for that. And Kimberly, over to you, that aha moment that clicked for everyone for your campus.
Similar to what Holly was saying, we really saw a huge culture shift, especially amongst our staff. We had a lot of turnover, which kind of led to the system we had in place before kind of falling apart. And once that system fell apart, it really like put into perspective how bad the problem was. And then our staff just became very like, why am I going to do the work if there's no accountability? We used to have staff who would go to a lot of athletic events and show up and watch our students at their athletic events. But when you have athletes who are 15, 20 minutes late to your class, it kind of makes it you don't want to go to their athletic event anymore because there was this sense of why is this student on the court playing when they can't uphold that student side of student athlete. So it really started to affect our overall school culture and just how that teacher student relationship was being impacted. And now one of our primary uses is we are holding our student athletes accountable. If you're late to class and you're on what we call our no activities list, you have to serve your detentions before you're eligible again. And it's helping get those students who are wanting to do all the extracurriculars. Well, you have to be a student first.
I love that. I mean, I think that really speaks a lot to how important equity is when it comes to systems and programming like this and handling things like tardies that, and when we hold the folks accountable that are at the top of the pyramid of our school culture, then that trickles down to everyone. And often those student athletes are those people, right? I think it's a little interesting because Kimberly, I want to just call you out specifically because, as an activities director, you're really responsible for a lot of the culture at the school. So I'm just curious, maybe on a side note, how did tardy management end up a little bit on your plate?
So our district is a little bit different. I am part of the administration team. So in our district, activities directors are an administrator. So I'm kind of like a tier below a vice principal. So really the whole of Minga is on my plate. So it just
Okay.
became natural that tardy piece also. I work very closely with our MTSS. We have a full-time MTSS on our campus who also does a lot more of the connecting with students and letting them know that they're on the no activity list or they have detentions. But I am there, like most students will come to me if they have a question because they know, oh, Miss Felix knows the answer. Let me go ask her.
I love it. Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna throw a poll up again and just a little bit of a sense of how everyone's managing tardies today. So go ahead and we'll give a minute here for everyone to take a crack at the poll. And if you do throw in that question, like we're using a dedicated tool or a platform, there's a question number 2 down there, just around what that question is. So it's open-ended, obviously a little text answer there, but that would be super helpful and valuable as well. So Chris, it must be smack middle of, speaking of football, it's smack middle of football season right now, isn't it?
Yes, we're in playoffs this week, so we hit El Paso Franklin tomorrow night. So
So you're at El Paso?
No, we're at home, thank God. I'm
Good.
tired of traveling.
Nice. Who's the favorite? I mean, obviously,
It will be a good one. That's all I can say at this point.
it's going to be close.
For
Okay,
people
I
that
love it.
don't know, we travel 5 hours just for games. So
All right, so into this one, actually this one catches. I'm a little surprised here because we have so many people mentioning that they are using a dedicated tool or platform. So that caught me a little off guard. Often on a lot of these, we hear that there's a ton of death by spreadsheets or no consistent plan. I got one in there. What do you mean, managed tardies? So that's super helpful, and thank you everyone for answering the open-ended question there too. So, but lots of dedicated tools or platforms. All right, thank you. So, Holly, let's start with you a little bit. Can you just give us an overview now of what does tardy management look like now? Maybe pick to walk us through the process of like maybe Chris mentioned at the beginning of school that's where tardies hit the most. So like what's the actual process in those situations as well? But just give us an overview of what does it look like now.
So now for us, we have our teachers do mark students tardy in Minga. So I know that obviously there's an option for students to do it themselves, but we do have teachers that still like that little bit of control to mark that. So they mark students tardy in Minga for our 2nd through 6th period, and we take care of the tardy to school piece. So we have those two separate pieces. And then we have it automated to set up that once they reach 3 tardies to class, then our administrators, we all get an email. And once we get that email, then we follow whatever our policy is for our consequences. And so we take care of the write-ups. I don't do a whole lot of it. I have great assistant principals that take care of the discipline part. So they usually dedicate like a day or two during the week where they just hammer out the tardies. And so they'll take care of the write-ups and they'll just pull kids in. If it's their first, it's just a warning and a conversation. And then we just have a tier where it's just an hour of detention. Then it's, it kind of goes from there. And so we have conversations about kind of maybe some other proactive pieces to work on that. But, we're still kind of early in the tardy process. And so like now that we're managing it with Minga, I think that's kind of the part where we are. And I think the teachers are appreciating that because they just mark it and then it's off their plate and they do that. And so it's worked really well. And I think a lot of the times we don't see kids after that first warning. Very few times do we see repeat offenders after that. And so then it's, definitely beyond the first or second consequence are we seeing that. And it's more just kind of random kids that we are seeing. And then it's kind of talking to them about what plans do you have in place to get to classes. And sometimes it's like, I just have a really hard time getting from this class to this class. And we're like, we've walked campus. You can get there in 5 minutes. You just got to walk a little faster. You can't walk your girlfriend to class or we can't be meeting our friends and, like try to hug in the hallway, so it's those kind of conversations that are happening that has been really great because now we're getting to have those and getting to know kids through that. But that is our process with tardies now.
That's amazing. Thank you. Kimberly, let's pass it over to you. Talk a little bit about how tardies are managed today.
So similar, we use Minga and have the automation set up. So teachers do have to go in and mark a student tardy when they arrive tardy to class. Students get 15 warnings every time they get one of those tardies. It pops up on there and you've been issued a tardy. They get a little note that reminds them of our tardy policy. If once you hit 15, you'll start getting detentions. They get a final warning message at 10 telling them, hey, you've hit 10, 5 more, you're going to start getting detentions. And then once they hit that 15th, they get a detention for every time they're tardy after that. That is our school tardy policy. We do reset at the start of each quarter. So every quarter they get those 15 warnings again. This year, we made changes to our tardy policy after using Minga to track tardies for the first year last year because we found that there was some confusion. Our threshold where they got put on no activity was different than our threshold when they started getting detention. So we kept having kids asking, am I clearing tardies or am I clearing detentions? How many tardies do I need to clear? How many detentions? And so there was this like idea that they were two separate things. So this year we made the threshold the same. If they have any detentions at all, they're put on our no activity list. That's when our MTSS starts meeting with them, telling them, hey, you can't participate in extracurriculars until you serve your detentions. Here's the detention schedule. And then on the back end, I go through and clear some of those detentions and monitor who is on the no activity list. I would say one of the biggest impacts for us is that students now can look at that data for themselves, whereas before they were having to go into their areas, see how many tardies they have, but sometimes teachers aren't putting all those in Minga, so looking at areas isn't necessarily the same number. Or with our old system, even teachers couldn't really look to see how many consequences a student had. Now with Minga, any teacher can look and see, oh, yes or no, you're on the no activity list. This is how many consequences you have. Students can look and see, and it just makes the whole process a lot more streamlined.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Kimberly. And Chris, over to you on the same question. How are you running this? And maybe call out anything different than what's been covered a little bit already. If you have other nuances, that'd be great.
Yeah, so we in the mornings we have a welcoming committee, I call it. So there is a group of us that stand out there. We use our phones and we scan their IDs. I make sure that the volume is up because I feel like the ding sound is like Pavlov's Siri. You know, they're like, oh man, I got another tardy. We also, so that's what we do at the beginning of school is we stand out there and we catch their tardies there. Once they get inside, every teacher has a Minga station set up inside of their classroom. And so during normal classes, so second through fourth period, they actually will get their tardies through their teacher. And then at lunchtime, we do the same thing. We stand out there, we welcome them back, and then we scan them in. And I think the biggest impact for us, and this is last year, we had an aha, and that was we had 0 tardies after lunch. And again, I mean, that's a big thing for us. We love the automation system because what the automation system will do for us is that after their 8th tardy for us, at that point, what we do is we go pick them up from their classroom and we give them lunch detention. They get a 1 hour lunch here. So to lose 30 minutes of their lunch, they can't go out of the school in order to get lunch. So that's tough on them. I don't know what it is, but they don't like cafeteria food. I don't know what that is.
Super helpful. And so just a quick question on some of this stuff, especially around the Tardy system, moving to automations, and that's a big part of course, in Minga, our behavioral framework is putting in those behavioral automations to automate these workflows from numbers of tardies to when things get assigned. If you had to pick how much less time, usually these processes fall onto like an assistant principal or an administrator to go and manually do this. How much less or time do you think you save every week for your staff and admin time, moving to an automated framework instead of that manual tardy, counting that was taking place before?
I think we save a lot of time. I can't tell you the exact amount of number, but every 6 weeks we clear it back out and we restart for every 6 weeks because we're on a 6 week grading cycle, and that helps them out on that part too. But the automation has made their lives a whole lot easier. So we get an attendance clerk to run the report, and that's when they go out and they find the student. So
nice.
Not only time, but I would say we're saving a lot of paper because before we were having to run the report and print out slips for students so they knew how many consequences they had because they didn't have access to look at it through that system. And we're not having to do that now. We do run it for like students on our no activity list periodically just to check in with them, but we're not running it on a weekly basis and then trying to deliver these slips to students and make sure they had that information.
Oh, that's a great comment too. Thanks, Kimberly.
Yeah, and it's a lot of time, and it's not a lot of time every year either, because once you've set up the automation, it's there. The only thing I have to remember is to reset things, and they'll have to yell at me because we reset our tardies we're on 9 weeks, so we reset ours too. And so my APs will just have to yell at me to reset them and to remember to reset them. And so then I just go in and do those things. But it saves so much time, and it's so easy just because they can pull up their laptop during cafeteria duty. And it blows my mind about people leaving during lunch. Like I don't, there's a lot I have to process with that, Chris. And so that's just a lot for me to process. I can't imagine kids leaving during the day, but that's great that you all can do that. But so they can just pull stuff up and they can write tardies and do some things like that. So like it's super easy because they can do it wherever they are. They don't have to be in the office. They can be in a classroom during a walkthrough, during an observation, kind of anywhere. And kind of can run through those tardies, and it's just so quick, and because it's so user friendly, it's not hard to use. The reports are so easy. They can go in and click and archive stuff if they're like, oh, we have kids that go out to the farm for ag, and kids that sign out for co-op or some different stuff like that, that they can be like, oh, it wasn't really a tardy. And so they can clean stuff up. It's just super quick for them, not just teachers. It saves teachers times, but it also saves them time. And they can do tardies like it's so quick. It's just so much quicker than the process before.
And I know I haven't, I never, you should never ask a webinar question that you haven't pre-screened, but I'm going to do it anyways, because I'm a slow learner. But has anyone started experimenting with like integrating automated notifications to parents? And
Yes, we do, and it's great. So my superintendent's daughter is actually at our school, and so I was talking about Minga the other day, and she says, "Yes, I got the message." So that was great. That was awesome.
I got a parent email they were like, I got the Tardy email and I'm just really trying to keep up with it. And then I got another email and I was like, well, it'll just be a warning if it's a start tardy. But then I got another email that was like, I actually checked his Life 360 and they were still on the bus back from the farm. So the bus from ag was late. And I was like, well, we'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. So I'm like, well, now they're, checking where their kids are. So, which is great, because it is just that parent communication. But we had just turned it on, I think last year, hadn't really got a lot of communication, but because we use some other parent communication this year, I think they're just more in tune to getting those things and checking emails now. But they were really on it and made sure that they were checking where their kids were.
I love that. One other question. We're gonna wrap it up here, and we have a time for Q&A, and I know we're coming right up on our time here. We've got one more quick poll, and then I got a closing question that I'd love to touch on a little bit off the cuff too. But poll number 3, when you think about improving your tardy management system, what manages most to you? Take a second for poll there. I already see consistency, accountability, and clear expectations bubbling up here. I love that. I think um, I call it the 3 C's of all your policies at school, but clarity, consistency, and well communicated are the great 3 C's to think about when you build policies like this. And doubling, clarity can also be translated to simplicity. The simpler you keep them, and I love that. I think Kimberly, you're just like 15 tardies and then it's detentions. And Chris, you might have mentioned 8. I might be mixing up people, here, but just that clarity around what it is. A funny nuance that we often see when you do implement a really consistent system at school is, folks will say, well, hey, we have a tardy policy. After 2 tardies, you get, after school detention. And the only reason that policy works is because they're not tracking tardies really closely, because or else every student would have after school detention every day. And so you will find, some folks on the webinar might feel, Kimberly, like 15 tardies a quarter seems crazy. But when you start recording them really accurately, it is amazing, I think, how, you know, where we need to have the numbers, and then you can start to dial them back, right, slowly. But if you go too aggressive right out of the gate, you're going to be overwhelmed with trying to have 700 students in after school detention. All right, super helpful. Yeah, a lot of clarity. So consistency, accountability comes up really, really high. Of course, reducing tardies overall, but really helpful. Thank you. I'm going to switch our last question because I think there's lots of implied advice that you're talking about right now. So last question, because we talked a lot about culture and it came up, through our conversations. And maybe Holly, because you talked about culture really well, about the experience you were having at school. I would just love to understand, as you've implemented, and started to hold accountability around tardies, how has that impacted the culture at your school?
I think for our teachers, like I said, we had a lot of work to do with teacher morale and culture. And I think it's just giving us a platform to hold students accountable. It's also a way, I mean, you can monitor what teachers are using it and not using it. So you can also hold teachers accountable as well. But I think just it's a way to hold people accountable. And I think teachers want students to be held accountable. And that was just a way to do that with very little teacher monitoring. So the teachers didn't have to monitor it. And that was just a huge culture shift for us. And so, like I said, anything that we could have taken off their plates and we were able to do that. And now that there's conversations about like how else can we use the behavior pieces of that, what other like classroom managed behavior things could we do with that other than just tardies to class and tardies to school, because tardies to school was just another huge piece. And so we have someone stationed there that's catching tardies. We have a ton of tardies to school this year because there's someone catching them as they're coming in the building. But I think it's been a huge piece the last couple years that teachers have really appreciated.
Thank you. And Kimberly, over to you on that. And maybe you touched a little bit on participation in events and activities and attendance, at events and activities and athletics events. Can you maybe touch on the same question, but with that activities director's lens of participation and engagement?
Yeah. So obviously kids who aren't engaged, who aren't attending events, it's still hard to hold them accountable. There's still a lack of consequence for them. But for those students who do want to attend things, we started even coming to Friday football games. If you're on our no activity list, you have detentions, you're not coming in even just to watch the football game. And so we had a lot of students who at first were kind of like, what are you talking about? And then once we explained it, you saw them in detention the next week and they were there and they were doing whatever they needed to do. I had 2 cheerleaders who ended up on the no activity list because they had detentions. And so they made sure to do their detention because it was the last Friday night football game and they wanted to be able to cheer at their last game. And so they put in the work to get those detentions done. So it's really seeing a shift there with our students in holding them accountable for their actions, essentially. I also think one big piece that's really having a shift for us is having that data to back up our decision making. So trust me, we went back and forth about our threshold and that 15 number. There's a lot of our staff who thinks that number is outrageous and too high. We argued back and forth on the number several times. Last year it was lower, this year it was higher. But now we have the data to show our staff members, okay, this is how many students are hitting that threshold. This is what we're doing. This is how we're holding them accountable. Whereas before it felt like our admin team was just having to be like, oh, trust me, we're holding them accountable. And staff was like, really? Because I don't see it. Yeah. Now we have the data to show here's how many students were assigned to detention. Here's how many have served a detention. Here's what our tardies looked like this quarter versus the second quarter. So it's going to allow us to kind of see, again, this is only our second year really fully utilizing it. So hopefully by the end of the year, we can see an improvement from quarter 1 to quarter 4 and then know that some of this stuff is working.
Amazing. Thank you. And Chris, I'm going to switch the question up a little bit and then we're going to wrap up with a closing poll. But Chris, if you could give one piece of advice to a school struggling with tardies right now, what would you say?
I think the biggest thing is really look at a system, like figure out what your system is, and build off that system itself. Like at first, it's not going to work out. You're going to have to tweak it. You're going to have to make it work for what goes on at your school. One thing I will say, the funny thing we've kind of talked about before was, the students hated Minga at first, because they're like, oh, I'm getting tardies. But now they love it because they're also getting PBIS points off of it. And so that's one of the things that we see with the students is that, they hate the tardy side of things, but they're being held accountable. It's like this. I tell a teacher, if you've changed your seating chart and students go, oh man, I don't want to sit there, then you probably need to redo it again. And I think that's the one thing, when we started looking at this and building it, is we really were looking at what is a way that we can hold all students accountable, and be able to work that system itself. So
Yeah, I love that. And Chris, it's always an interesting thing when we come in and even bring Minga into a school and we go through onboarding with a school, and often where we start are disciplinary elements like hallway management, tardy management, right now like cell phone management, things like that are at the top of the list of reasons people are bringing Minga in. And of course, anytime you shift from no accountability to a high level of accountability, the students are going to see it's going to feel like a lot of friction, and you're going to get some of that back, right? And the interesting part is as we see some of our schools now where Minga's just been part of their experience since the students started as freshmen, that's just part of the culture, right? And that's just a culture of accountability is just how our high school runs. And then you really get the emphasis that, well, it's points and rewards, incentives, like those types of elements that really connect with the students. So I love that comment. Thanks, Chris. We got one closing poll that Emily is going to throw up here, and then we will send everyone off to their day. So the last poll is, how ready do you feel to improve your tardy management process? And while everyone's taking a time to finish the poll there, thank you, Chris, Kimberly, and Holly, for your time and all your insights and sharing your stories today. So helpful for everyone. I'm to just to hear from other administrators that not only are experiencing the same challenges, but also are making progress and conquering some of these challenges. So thank you all very much for joining us today. We are forever appreciative for your time and for engaging with us. And with that, we'll let everyone wrap up the poll and send you on to your wonderful, I almost said wonderful Wednesday, wonderful Thursday. So and good luck this weekend, Chris.
thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Kimberly and Holly and Chris again. Thank you all for joining. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.